Okay. The first thing I want to make sure, you guys got all the study guides that I sent out, right? All these?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I have all of them.
Good, because the one I
is
really
this
want to
quiz-
sort of just underscore here is the one that I sent on how to study. And this is going to be tedious and, long, but it's going to be very much worth your time if you read over what I did. I just broke down 3 questions just to give you an example on how to do it, right? And the key here is you not only know why the right answer is right, but you know why the wrong answer is wrong. Because it's not going to help you just to memorize the question and the answer, because it's not going to be the same question exactly, and it's not going to be the same answers. But it will be the same concept and the same idea. So what you don't want, what you want to avoid is, for example, looking at a question and not knowing why A is wrong. Like, well, I know B is right, but why isn't A right as well, right? You want to know absolutely why A, B, C, D, and E are wrong, okay? And sometimes it's just, sometimes it's very simple. It's a definition, and this is not it. But sometimes it's a little bit more tricky, and you have to sort of think about the graph or think about what's going on in the scenario of the question, so you can really know in your own mind why, because they don't just put these just aren't random thoughts they have for wrong answers. They really put a lot of thought into the wrong answers. So if you understand why the wrong answers are wrong, you really understand the concept, okay? So read over this, and if you're going through your studying, because we're going to have a pretty long break, where we're not going to have, assignment 10 is not due until the first week of April. So you're going to have basically the whole month of March off for spring break, but that doesn't mean that's the time you need to be really reviewing for the final and for the AP exam in May, by going over your quiz questions from quiz 4 forward. Because from quiz 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 11 are all going to have actual AP questions on them, okay? So if you understand those to the level that I've done here, you'll do great. Hey, Lucia, how you doing? Hi.
Hi.
So I was just talking about how important, how I really want you guys to look at this study guide that I sent out, how to study for your final and the AP exam, and how to actually take each of the quiz questions you've had since quiz 4. You got 20 questions on quiz 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you're going to have over 100 of questions. I think 120 or so to look at. And if you really understand half of them, you'll do great on your final, okay? Understand it to the level that I have, done here. Because what I've done, if you've looked at it, and I hope you have, is I've really broken down the rationale. I mean, I've really looked at why the wrong answers are wrong. Like, why could A not be the answer? Or why could E not be the answer? Why is that not the answer? Because that really, if you can answer that, then you really understand the concept. Okay. And then the other ones, I sent you out one that is really helpful with all the formulas you have to know, and some great explanations on what would change, what would cause the curves to shift, and what would cause movements on the curves. So I sent that out. So that's a great study tool. And I also sent out a really helpful guide that has all the formulas that you have to know, right? They're all in one spot. Very helpful. So take some time to look at this. You're going to have to know all of these for the exam. You just have to know them. So the more you look at them, the more you're going to know them. Okay. And a big part of the quiz 9 is using these graphs and using these formulas. So, quiz 9. Okay, so we're recording. I'll make sure. Quiz 9, which is right here. So the first thing is you're going to want to draw, understand, analyze a money market graph. Specifically know what we cause the money supply and money demand curves to shift, and the effects these shifts would have on the nominal interest rate and money supply. Okay, so a money market graph, what does that look like? Well, if you don't know, which you should know, but if you don't, you can certainly look at this handout right here. Let me make it a little bit bigger. And you can find it. It's right here, isn't it? Now, and I'm going to talk about this more, but don't get confused between the money market graph and the loanable funds graph. They're similar, but not the same at all. And I've got them right here, actually. So if we look at the money market, we can see that the variable on the vertical axis is the nominal interest rate, right, which is not taking into account inflation. On the loanable funds graph, we've got the real interest rate, which means that this is going to change not only when the nominal interest rate changes, but it's going to change when inflation changes, isn't it? Because if inflation is higher, it means the real interest rate is lower, isn't it? So, and then the other part about that is you need to know that this is controlled. This is the money supply curve that can only be changed by the Federal Reserve, doing some kind of monetary policy, right? So that's why this is vertical, right? And in the loanable funds graph, we've got an upward sloping a supply of loanable funds and a downward sloping demand curve for loanable funds. And then over here, it's just money demand, right? This is the nominal interest rate. This is the real. So so this is probably the most confusing thing. So I wanted to make sure you guys really think about, what these two graphs are for and what they're showing. So going back to the study guide, which is here, I'm asking you about a money market graph. What would cause the money supply to shift, right? Well, that's just going to be shifted by the Federal Reserve either using expansionary or contractionary monetary policy, right? If the Federal Reserve sells bonds, they sell bonds, that means banks are getting bonds, right? And they're having to pay money for the bonds, so that makes the money supply smaller, which shifts this curve to the left, that way, right? If the Federal Reserve Bank buys bonds, that's expansionary. They're buying bonds, so they're buying the bonds from the banks, giving the banks money that increases the money supply, right? So the money supply goes up, okay? And it probably is going to increase the supply of loanable funds as well, because the banks are going to now have more in their reserves. And so they'll have more money over their required reserves to be able to loan out. So these graphs are very related, okay, but different. Okay, so found where that, okay, so obviously when we have any kind of a shift in these curves, and this is why it's so important to be able to draw them, isn't it? Because if I just look at the graph, it's very easy to see, well, if the money demand curve shifts out, then the interest rate goes up, right? If the money demand decreases, the interest rate goes down. If the money supply is increased and it shifts to the right, obviously the nominal interest rate goes down. And that's what expansionary monetary policy is. They're trying to lower the interest rates in order to stimulate both investment, because now investment is less expensive, because remember, this type of investment is usually done with borrowed money, right? They would finance their investment. A firm would. So the lower the interest rate, the easier it is for them to finance an investment. Now, it also means that consumers are more likely to buy things on credit. So that's also going to shift the aggregate demand, which is a different graph, isn't it? Which is up here, right? To the right, because consumers are going to see that their credit cards have lower interest rates, right? So that's what the Fed's trying to do. Expansionary, when they buy bonds, which shifts the money supply to the right, they're trying to shift the aggregate demand to the right, raise real GDP, okay? And, help the economy come out of a recession, okay? And you know that. This is just a review. I know you know that. Okay, where was we? Where were we? So we want to understand, and I've kind of gotten into this one right here, open market operations. What we're talking about there, of course, is when the Federal Reserve either buys or sells bonds on the open market. And how is that going to affect nominal interest rates, inflation, and the quantity of reserves held by the banks? Well, obviously, if they're going to use expansionary policy, right? And I've got this, and that's going to shift. That means they're going to buy bonds, which shifts the money supply to the right, which means the nominal interest rate is going to go down, which means that investment and consumer spending is going to go up, which means that aggregate demand is going to shift to the right, which means that output goes up. If aggregate demand shifts to the right, not only does output go up, price level is going to go up, isn't it? So if you are fluent with all of the graphs, you can figure any of this stuff out because it's all related and it's all in the graphs. Okay. And what else? What was it? I think there might have been one more variable there we were talking about. Oh, and reserves, right? So of course, if the money supply is going to increase and the banks have more money, then they're going to be able to have more in reserve, right? And if the Federal Reserve uses contractionary policy where they sell bonds, which takes money out of the supply, just everything I just said, the opposite, right? It's all the opposite. Okay. Okay, understand the relationship between the discount rate and aggregate demand. Well, I think what they're talking, I don't remember the question, but it's pretty straightforward. The discount rate, as you should know, is the rate the Federal Reserve charges at their discount window when banks need to borrow money short term in order to keep the required reserves in their bank. If they've gone below their required reserves, they've got to borrow some money, and they can borrow it from the Fed if they want to. They usually borrow it from each other. So if the discount rate goes down, it's going to mean borrowing money is easier, right? If the discount rate drops, it means that, I believe it means that aggregate demand is going to shift to the right. But you know what? Let me make sure about that. So let me make sure about it. Hello, guys. I don't want to. There's something about that one I don't remember, so I'm going to check it real quick. Okay. Let's see. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay. Let me look at that again. I'm trying to, what I'm trying to do is figure out, see, these questions are not easy. And what I want to do is be able to help you guys understand the steps in between. Like a lot of these questions that you'll jump 3 steps to get from the question to the answer. And, and I don't want just to memorize, well, if this happens, that's going to happen. I want you to know why, what has to happen in between, right? So if the discount rate goes up, let's think about this. If the discount rate goes up, let me go back to sharing again. But first, let me minimize. Just give me 1 second here. I don't want that to show. Okay, share. So if the discount rate goes up, then it's going to shift the aggregate demand to the left. Now, why is that? Well, let's think about that. That means that if the discount rate goes up, it's harder for banks to borrow money. So there's going to be less investment. I think the key is in investment, but I'll have to look into that some more. I mean, the short answer is when the interest rates are higher, it tends to make borrowing money for investment harder. So that's going to shift the aggregate demand to the left. There's probably more to it than that. That's just not coming into my head at the moment, but I'll think about it. I find macroeconomics harder than micro because there's just so many different things going on. And you got to, and there's a lot of cause and effect change. It's not just, it's like more than one. Are you guys okay? Because I keep, can you hear me? Because I keep getting a thing saying that that it's not stable. Anyway. Okay. Okay. Now this is easy right here, isn't it? I mean, in order to bring an economy out of a recession, the fundamental goal is to shift the aggregate demand to the right. They're trying to get output up. They're trying to get up to here, aren't they? Right? They're trying to get up to the point where we're at full employment, either on this short term or that short run, up to a point where we're at full employment and at our potential, right? So they're trying to shift the aggregate demand. So if we're in a recession, then that means our output's going to be below our potential, below where the long run aggregate supply curve is. So they're trying to shift it out. So fiscal policy is either going to be the government spending more, which is a function, which is part of what aggregate demand is, government spending. So that's going to shift aggregate demand to the right, or the government can decrease taxes, which gives everyone more disposable income, which means there's more spending, more investment, and that shifts the aggregate demand. So fiscal, F-I-S-C-A-L, fiscal policy is either going to be that's expansionary, is either going to be increased government spending or decreased taxes. Now, I'm up here. For monetary policy, which we have in here, which I don't really have here, but I'll just say it's going to be increasing the money supply, right? Which is buying bonds on the open market. That's what they're going to use, right? Monetary policy would be expansionary, which would be increasing the money supply. So that would be shifting this curve right here to the right, which shifts the aggregate demand curve to the right, hopefully. If the people actually spend the money or invest the money that's going into the money supply, which is why money velocity is also very, very important. And we'll get to that. Okay, this is just understanding what I've been talking about all along. You know, what happens at the beginning, right? What happens, for example, when there's physical expansionary policy, physical. Well, that means that the aggregate demand, if the government spends more, aggregate demand is going to shift to the right, which means that price goes up, which is going to maybe cause inflation. It means that output goes up, unemployment goes down, right? So, because as we move, this is also full employment. This is not full employment, right? So as we move to the right on this graph right here, we're moving to the left. If I have it here somewhere, which I thought I did, I thought for sure I had it somewhere. We're moving to the left on the Phillips curve, aren't we? We're going from here to here. When the aggregate demand curve shifts out, we're going from here to here. So we're lowering unemployment, right? So all these things are happening. So that's, and then if we think about monetary policy, you know, which we've talked about over and over again, you know, if this is going to shift out because of expansionary policy, that means nominal interest rates go down. It means investment goes up, which means aggregate demand shifts out, right? So this is what I mean by knowing all the you know, cause and effect of relationships that are happening. And also, what hopefully will happen when this shifts out is we'll also get that we'll get a change over here. We'll get a change in unemployment. It should go that way, but not a shift though. It's a movement. This is a shift I'm actually going to talk about in assignment 10. So we're going to get more on that. I think this is actually what I've got, for assignment 10. So we're going to talk about what causes this to shift. So that's not something you need to worry about right now, but you will be. Okay, so let's see. Understand how to use the simple money multiplier to calculate the maximum increase in the money supply. So if you know that there's a certain amount of money going into the money supply, we need to use the simple money multiplier, which is right on this graph right here, I believe, right here, which is simply 1 over the reserve ratio, right? So say the reserve ratio, say banks are required to keep 10% of their money in reserve, then it's simply 1 over 1 divided by 0.1, which is 10. So you would multiply whatever amount the Fed increase the money supply by 10, right? That's how that works. Okay. This is just simply thinking about what combinations of policy can keep price level from going up, okay? So if we want to if we want to increase investment and we want price level to stay the same, then we've got to use expansionary monetary policy, which is going to put more money in the money supply, but we're going to have to use contractionary fiscal policy to keep aggregate the demand from shifting too far to the right. What they're really trying to do is shift supply to the right, okay? Which means, because if you think about it, if there is capital investment, that's going to change aggregate supply. So this is why it gets complicated. You know, just simple domestic spending, I mean, a domestic investment is part of aggregate demand. But when it's capital investment, when a company invests in expanding their factory, that is an increase in aggregate supply. So they could use expansionary monetary policy to increase capital investment, give banks more money to loan for capital investment. That shifts aggregate supply to the right, which is going to mean, which is going to mean more investment. And then they could raise taxes, which would shift aggregate demand back to the left, which would keep price level right where it was, right? Does that make sense? Just playing with the graph. So if you shifted aggregate demand up here, if it was here, you could shift supply to here and you would get more output, but the same price level, okay? Or you could shift aggregate demand from here to here, right? So, and then you could keep the same, because if you only shifted aggregate demand, price level is going to go up, isn't it? Like say we're on this blue line here. So say we're going from, whoops, sorry about that. Say we're going from here on the solid blue, from here to here. Well, price level is going to go up, right? So and that's what they don't want. They want to increase investment, which would mean, let me think about that, which would mean this would go there. That would actually drop price level. If we go from here to here, you want to shift it back out. I think though, hold on again. I think what they're talking about. Let me just check that. Once again, this is confusing. Whoops, sorry about that. I don't remember the question. If it doesn't really matter, just understand that you're going to, in order to get this to happen, you're going to have to use some kind of a physical policy, which is a contractionary, to bring price level down. Because expansionary monetary policy does shift the aggregate demand curve to the right, okay? So you want to shift it back. So anyway, the bottom line here is you want to have physical policy that offsets the price level increase of the monetary policy. And that's all I want to say with it without actually giving away the answer. Okay. This is something, once again, it's kind of a review or kind of the same thing over and over again, but we know that the way they change the interest rate is to change the money supply, right? And the way they increase or decrease the money supply is buy or sell bonds. And once again, if we go back to this graph down here, I could get to it, you can see that if they expand or they increase the money supply, then the interest rates, the federal funds rate goes down. If they go the other way from here over to here, then the federal funds rate goes up. So that's how they do it with expansionary and contractionary money supply. Okay. All right. Almost there. So a lot of these, this is really, this unit is really a big part of your curriculum. So I was able to find a lot of questions that are very, very related. So once again, why is that? It's okay, guys. Why is that? So this right here is just once again understanding how these variables relate, right? If the tax rate goes up or down and the discount rate goes up or down. So if the tax rate goes up, then it's going to mean that there's going to be less, there's going to be it's going to be more expensive to invest, right? Actually, it's going to be just less consumption, right? So that would mean real GDP goes down. The discount rate is going to obviously affect the interest rate. If it goes up, then overall the discount rate is kind of the bottom rate. So if it's going to go up, all the other interest rates are going to go up, which is going to drive a GDP down. Okay, so this is just understanding how these variables relate. When the government wants to use expansionary policy and shift the aggregate demand to the right and raise GDP, they decrease taxes. So the tax rate would drop. If they want to use contractionary fiscal policy, that means they're going to increase taxes, which would shift the aggregate demand to the left. Okay, and this is just a definition that you can find in your book. No, that's easy. So this is sort of a tricky one. And the bottom line here is when the money supply is either goes up or goes down, it's only going to affect the nominal GDP if we assume rational expectations, which means people do act rationally. The real GDP doesn't change because real GDP is really what we're producing, like in goods and services. And just because there's more money in the supply, it means that price levels are going to go up. It means that things may cost more, which is going to change nominal GDP because that's based on the actual dollar amount. But the actual real, are you back? You back? It just dropped. Sorry about that. Hello? Is everyone here? I mean, I'm probably boring you to death. Can you hear me now? Everybody can hear me? It just dropped for a second. Sorry about that. Anyway, where was I? Whew. So this is hard to really think of. Where'd you guys go? Okay. So this is one of those ones where it's you got to think about, what, people, the key here is assuming rational expectations, assuming that people do, don't, I'm not even sure how to explain it. When the money supply changes, what's actually happening is that there is a feeling. It's more of a, it doesn't mean there's more stuff, right? Having more money doesn't mean that anyone's doing anything else. It's just that people are more likely to buy and sell it, if that makes any sense. So it makes people more likely to spend money if they have more money, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be any change in potential, right? That doesn't change the law. So really the bottom line here is the best way to explain it is that the money supply changes aggregate demand, but it doesn't change the potential. It doesn't change what the economy can potentially do. Okay, that can only be changed by something like factories expanding, more labor, like more workers coming into the country. Things like that actually make us able to produce more stuff. Okay, that's what I'm trying to explain. I'm not doing a very good job of it, but there it is. Okay. So the bottom line here is that the money supply, either increasing or decreasing, is going to affect nominal GDP, but not real GDP. Okay. We've already talked about how to use the simple money multiplier. So that's easy enough. Now, the velocity of money, I thought I had that formula for you guys somewhere. I thought I put it somewhere for you guys, but it's right here, right? So know that formula, which is, well, so I can find it real quick. Should be here. Yell if you see it. Here it is. Nope. Money, yeah. It's actually nominal GDP. Why is it? Okay. They've got it, but they've got it in a different format. They've got it right here. But you know what? If you go here and you just do this, easy thing to do, money velocity formula, like that. You guys here? Yeah, you're here. Okay. So it's here it is. It's nominal GDP over a money supply, right? So, and that's in your book. I put it in your assignment or somewhere. I remember cutting it out, but I don't know why it's not. Anyway, might have been in one of your other study guides, but you know, this is just knowing that the formula, and if you know it, you'll be able to get the answer to whatever the question is. Okay. So I'm actually doing, this is sort of redundant, so I'm not going to keep going over it, but this is just sort of, so a lot of these questions are going to be assessing whether you know this, probably the most important graph is this one right here, understanding the relationship between the money supply and nominal interest rate. So if you can draw this graph, you'll be able to figure a lot of these questions out fairly easily. Okay, and we're coming to the end here. Okay, so if the tax rate goes up, the government deficit goes down, doesn't it, right? And the money supply going up is going to shift aggregate demand to the right, because the government deficit is just the amount of, is the difference between the revenue that they bring in from taxes and what they spend. So a higher tax rate is going to lower the deficit. But a higher tax rate is also going to shift the aggregate demand to the left because people have less disposable income. So just understanding the relationship between these variables, okay? And that's pretty much it. Really spend some time. You're very, very helpful, and there's a lot of them, but they're helpful. These videos right here. You guys here? Okay, yeah, you're still here. Okay, so make sure that you go over, not 10, sorry about that, not 10. Go back. I'm getting ahead of myself here. 9, yeah, sorry. Make sure there's a lot here, but you don't, if you really go through these, you don't even have to read the book. I mean, it's good to read the book. Do do both, but I mean, this right here is comprehensive, okay? If you understand all these videos, and it looks like a lot, of course, but each one is about 10 a minute, so that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's an hour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's an hour. So you got about 4 hours. Yeah, you got a lot. You got maybe 4 or 5 hours here total, maybe 4 hours. So, that's why you've got some extra time. And hopefully you've looked at these and if you haven't, take some time, okay? Because they're really good. All right, guys. And that's about it. Let me make sure I have everybody marked as here, okay? Sebastian. Where am I? I can't see people. Okay, let me go back. Why am I not seeing? Okay, I've got Sebastian. We'll say, yeah, okay, we'll see you. Got you. How are you? There you go. Who else am I missing here? Laura.
Laura Moore.
Yeah, Laura. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know why I keep going by your name. Like I can't see it or something. It's great. Okay. All right, there we go. Let me stop the video. Okay. I think that's yeah. Okay, guys. So we're going to have a pretty good break now between